Well, welcome. Good evening. Let me start this here. My name is Jesse Garn. I'm acting as a team lead for Group 1. It's our pleasure to present to you the most widely used and extensible web server platform available in the world, Apache Web Server. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Jackie Freddy Kerb, who will explain some of the great features that set Apache apart from the competition. Jackie? Jackie, your mic is muted.
I'm so sorry.
There you go.
Thanks for introducing me, Jesse. Just like Jesse stated, the Apache Web Server is one of the most commonly chosen in today's available web servers. It's chosen worldwide. Features of the web server that set it apart is it's free. Anybody can use it at any time. It's also maintained by the open source community, which essentially means that anyone who participates in this type of thing is able to come in and contribute to the web server. This is also where any type of web help desk is found. Generally, the forums and available threads satisfy this need through just the different topics that are covered. Because it is open source, just about everything is covered and any question can be answered. The server is able to be used with any operating system, which is definitely good because it just makes it more compatible throughout things that are being created and the changes that are made. It's also able to facilitate more features and add-ons than other web servers that are available. This is especially helpful because you can find pre-made add-ons and then you can also easily code your own. And last, it is found to be more stable than the other web servers alternatives, and this is because it's monitored very closely by that open source community. You can imagine so many people worldwide interested in this type of thing. It monitors it very closely, and if there is a problem, they fix it very quickly. Next, we are going to have
Dylan,
I'm so sorry. I apologize.
You're fine.
So next, we're going to have Dylan, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about the web server.
All right, cool. So the web server at its core, the technical specifications that you need to actually have the web server run. First off is the operating system. You got to make sure that you are using either Windows Server 2008 or greater, so like 2000 over the latest release of Microsoft Windows Server, or you can use any type of Linux based operating system, which I prefer because Linux is also open source, so it's easier to be configured with the web server, and it has way more modules that you can actually use with the web server than a Windows server would have. Within the Linux, you can have like Red Hat or Ubuntu and run the web server off of that. And it's also free. So it kind of goes in with it doesn't cost anything to spin up a web server with Apache. The disk space you need is at least 50 megabytes for the initial install, and then the web server actually uses up only 10 megabytes. But as the system grows, of course, that's going to use more and more memory with more users connected to it. So what you're going to have to do is kind of scale it up a bit. I would prefer like you start off with like 120 gigabyte hard SSD card hard drive to start with, or even bigger depending on the scalability of what you're doing. The minimum memory you should use is 4 gigabytes of RAM. If you're using more core processors, which we recommend to use for physical cores at 1.65 gigahertz or more, it's best to actually use more RAM than that, so that each core can utilize its own set of RAM. So maybe 4 gigabytes of RAM per core that you have in the actual server. Initially out of the box, the Apache web server can support up to 40 to 100 users. However, that is hugely scalable up to 100,000 users per web server that you have running. And because of how easy it is to spin up an Apache web server. You can actually spin that up on multiple different machines. You can have a load balance between the two. So for scalability purposes, which we'll get into a little bit later in the presentation, the sky's the limit basically with how many users you can actually have connected to an Apache web server at once. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Sam, I believe.
No, that's me. It's Jesse.
Jesse.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Dylan. So the application that is Apache, it's called HTTPD, and it runs in the background. In Windows, it's called a service. In Unix, Linux, it's called a daemon. The way you configure the web server in traditional Unix, Linux is by modifying text files. The primary text file that you modify is the http.conf file. It's through this text file that you would set system parameters for Apache. The command line is the primary method for interacting with the service or daemon. You would use various CLI commands to perform tasks like stopping, starting the service, system monitoring, etc. While this is not necessarily the most intuitive thing to do, there's a wealth of Apache resources available on the web. There's huge communities that can help support installations for even newbies to this technology. If command line is not your style, you'll be pleased to know there's several GUI interfaces available for Apache. One such GUI is called Apache GUI, which is also free and open source. With Apache GUI, you can perform all the same tasks that you would otherwise do with the command line. Up next, Mr. Sam Hernandez will tell us about the scalability and perception of Apache. Sam?
All right. Okay, as far as scalability, Apache is a general purpose server. It's kind of a one-size-fits-all. With that being said, it doesn't mean it's bad. But it does provide portability, flexibility, and performance, which make it highly scalable, like Dylan mentioned earlier. Because the sky is the limit. You can depend a lot. It depends a lot on the hardware, and actually, it is one of, if not the most used server in the world as of right now. Oh, and it's not the fastest server. There's other servers like IIS, which provide more that are faster and maybe a little more reliable, but the advantage is that this one is open source. Now, if we go to perception on the next slide, one of the reasons why it's very popular is because it's inexpensive, but it's robust at the same time. Apache has two main competitors. There's more servers. There's more competitors out there, but the biggest ones are Nginx and IIS. The perception as well is since it's a community project, open source, it's the double-edged sword, which is it's nice that it's free. That's one of the advantages, but a disadvantage is that there's no official support. There's the IRC, the documentation website, and third-party support, which you can pay to get, but there's no official support from Apache. It's kind of a community thing. Lately, it's been declining in popularity to the other two competitors, which are Nginx and IIS. And that's as far as perception. And now we'll turn it over to Pharaoh.
Right. Thank you, Sam. And I would like to go over the Apache server costs. So the costs required to acquire the Apache web server are free. Basically, the Apache web server is free source. You can just go to the apache.org website, the Apache organization website, and you can just download the source code. So the Apache web server is free and it's open source, and there's no licensing fees required. As far as the costs required to maintain the Apache web server, it can be free if it's community supported. You see, I mean, when you get the Apache web server, you can use a source code and you can get support from the community as well. So in that case, it would be free, or you can get a specialized company, a professional specialized company that can maintain the servers for you, and then you would have to pay a fee for that. And the fee can go from a multiple $100s to maybe even thousands. The cost required to troubleshoot the Apache web server can be free as well if it's community supported, or it can be for money if you're going to get a specialized professional company to be able to do that for you. And a specialized professional company will charge you to do that service for you. to be able to troubleshoot the system and answer any questions. And that can cost from multiple hundreds to maybe thousands every month, depending on the company that you're going to hire and the kind of the kind of service you're going to have. The Apache Web Server is a free open source, but it has advantages and disadvantages. Having an open source system can give you a lot of problems in the future, depending on the usage and the traffic, because it can get changed all the time. But if you have a lot of support at the same time, that might not have that many problems. That might not give you that many problems in the future, depending on the technical support that you can have. So that's it for the costs. I would like to pass on for the conclusion to Mr. Jesse Grant, please. All right, Jesse, your mic is muted.
Good call. Thanks, Farrell. In conclusion, we've looked at Apache Web Server. We've looked at how it's the most popular web server platform on the net, likely due to its extensibility, stability, and best of all, it's free to use. We've talked about the ways you can interact with Apache and that there's ample documentation on the net to support you. We hope you found this presentation to be informative, and we thank you for your time. We'll now open it to any questions.